Keene with the School District of Monroe. I'm the Vice President. Rich Depre is unable to be here tonight, so welcome to the annual meeting and tonight's budget hearing. Thanks for coming and spending the evening with us. Some of you may have been here in the past, so you're familiar with the format of an annual meeting. It's different than our typical Board of Education meetings in that this is a meeting that's a public meeting of the district electors. So tonight, everyone here, if you live in Monroe, is entrusted with the powers defined in Wisconsin State Statute 120.10. District electors should exercise these powers with contemplation and care. And the action that this body takes tonight can have an impact on the operations of the school district and the welfare of the community it serves. I'll just kind of go over some of the initial rules. Only qualified electors of the School District of Monroe can participate in the annual meeting. A qualified elector is defined by state statute in part as a U.S. citizen age 18 or older who has resided in the school district for at least 28 consecutive days before tonight and has not been convicted of a felony. So if that applies to everybody, then hopefully everybody is signed in with their address and have verified that you live in the School District of Monroe, and as such, you're qualified to vote at this meeting. If anybody wants to speak at any point during the meeting, you're allowed to do that during the debate and question portion of the meeting. We just want to make sure that if you do, please state your name and address so Cindy can capture it for the minutes, because they all get published in the minutes that we look at next. At this time, we need to elect a chairperson for the meeting.
I would nominate Teresa Keene.
Second.
So we need to call for nominations 3 times. Are there any other nominations for chair for tonight? Any other nominations? So we had a motion by Nikki, right?
Yep.
And a second by Stacy.
Stacy? Yep.
All those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So I will gladly be the chairperson tonight. So as we, the first thing we have to do is approve the agenda for tonight. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. So if I can get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Stacy Kavanaugh and a second by Terry Ellison to approve the agenda for the School District of Monroe's annual meeting of October 17, 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are now on to reading and minutes from our previous meeting.
I'd like to
On
make a
October
motion
11th.
that we just approve them without reading them in open session.
Second.
There's a motion by Eric Ekdahl and a second by Terry Ellison to approve waiving of the reading of the October 11, 2021 annual meeting minutes. They're all found in your pamphlets, so you can read them. All those in favor of waiving the reading, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, so we typically now would have an introduction by the district administrator, and he is out doing presentations tonight. So he has been on the road at 2 different places tonight talking about our upcoming referendum. So he will be joining us when he's done with his most recent presentation. So he'll be coming from one and joining us.
Yeah, it's a little unusual year this year with the referendum.
It was like you're on cue.
And so I was just gonna say, Mr. Figueroa would usually do an introduction, but he's actually might still.
So I just have to say, if I run my scooter right now, I'd have been on time.
I heard a horn honk.
My truck's slowing me down. Sorry.
We were just gonna thank them all for attending, so no, you.
Okay, I'm Rod Figueroa, I'm the superintendent here. I think I recognize most of you, and thank you for coming tonight for the annual meeting. That's it. You already opened, obviously, right?
We were just getting ready to, but yeah, so I was just gonna say, you know, I think as we move forward to other years, probably we'll, sometimes we give a little more of a state of the state. This year, obviously, we've had a significant, focus on the referendum for the new high school, and so that's really where a lot of our work is, although we have, Todd Parody and Joe Monroe certainly are working hard with the rest of our admin staff on, some of our, focus on our academics, and so, but tonight, I get to talk a little at you a lot, so I appreciate y'all coming out and letting me do that. And if nothing else, we're gonna jump into the budget hearing. And so, I'm basically going to go through a slideshow. Some of it's gonna follow what's in your book, and so I'll kind of reference, the pages, as needed. There's information in there from basically pages 5 through, 50 that are really budget information in there. If you ever have any questions, feel free to call me or stop in and see me. I'd be happy to. I'm not gonna go through all those pages. I don't expect you to go home and read this. I'm not gonna test anybody. But it is there, and it's a good resource for people as they go. Toward Jennifer. Worked a little bit ago. Come on, work with me. Jim, how could I work like a little bit ago and not now? There we go. So looking at the 21-22 budget review, so this is looking back at last year. Our Fund 10 revenues typically come in really close, so it's a little bit of an anomaly that we were actually almost 1.8% off. Our budgeted revenues were $30.7 million. They came in at $31.3 million. The surplus of revenues we received last year was $565,000. The two biggest things that came in that led to that differential, we had $310,000 of basically federal relief dollars that the governor allocated to school districts mid-year. And so that was a great bonus because we didn't have any dollars in our revenue limit last year, so those were dollars that were appreciated. And then we had a couple $100,000 of additional Medicaid funds that came in from previous years when we had claims, but every now and then they go back and review those claims, and we always get more money, and I haven't figured out how the process works, but I love it. So some of those funds came in. Come on, you can do it. Jen, I guess you're gonna be the advanced person. Looking at our Fund 10, did I go way too far? Oh, no, it went, I'm sorry, I was moving. All right, now looking at the Fund 10 expenditures, we had budgeted expenditures of $31.2 million. We typically bring in our expenditures 2 to 3% under. Last year they came in at $30,365,000. So we were $853,000 under budget, meaning we came in 2.73% less than budgeted. That's pretty typical. We had a few areas last year that, probably save dollars that don't always save us money. We had, a real difficult time getting substitute teachers, and so we're always looking for substitute teachers if any of you are interested. And so we probably had some savings in those budget line items. But other than that, it's just trying to have that, mentality of where we can save dollars, we do. Unfortunately, last year we did have a couple of positions that went unfilled because we couldn't find teachers. And so that also kind of helped feed into us bringing in that budget under. When you look at the budget review, last year we had a starting fund balance of $8,060,000. We had a budgeted deficit of nearly $500,000, which would have led us to an ending budget of $7.5 million. As it was, we came in with a surplus of $924,000. So our actual ending fund balance was $8.9 million coming forward into this year. Looking at our 22-23 budget, compared to last year's budget, so this is budget to budget, and some of the other sheets will be last year's actual to budget, but this is last year's budget dollars to this year's budget dollars. Revenues are a 1.46% increase. Not a lot of increase there. What's the increase? One thing that we do know we're getting this year is $220,000 of, again, governor allocations of federal COVID dollars that are coming out. So this year we know it in advance, so we can put it in the budget. And that's the primary one. The other area is the ESSER funds. We're using our ESSER grant dollars to backfill our budget. That's kind of what we're required to do with no revenue limit increases. Where last year we utilized $700,000 of ESSER funds to make our budget work. This year we're going to use $1.2 million of ESSER funds, and that'll leave us with $200,000 of ESSER funds yet to carry forward into 23-24. Our expenditures did increase 2.82% from last year's budget. You'll see, recall we came in less than budgeted last year, so when you see in a subsequent slide where we compared to last year's actual, it'll be a more significant increase. That's a big product of the inflation, so that's impacting both the salary and fringe side of the world, but also just the materials and purchase services certainly are right now running at a faster rate of increase than usual. Our levy, we're looking at a 7.57% decrease, $939,000. We're getting an additional $1 million of state aid this coming year. So we're looking at a levy decrease of $939,000. So that's great news for us. And the mill rate is looking at a 19.63% decrease, or a $1.80 decrease. And so when I talk about the mill rate and the budget and the levy, we're going to talk about at the time that the budget book was developed and what was published in the paper. I will give a little snapshot at the end as to the new state aid that came out just last Friday, and what that will look like, because the board will be acting on the mill rate and the levy next Monday to certify those new dollars. So on the same slide as that one. So what are the big items of note? Again, we have that operating deficit projected at $926,251. We feel okay about that because we have $310,000 of the governor's revenues from last year we didn't use because we weren't planning on getting those revenues. So we set those aside. The board designated those dollars to come into this school year to address the increase in wages that we were going to have. And so without, we're in essence looking at about a $600,000 deficit if you take those $310,000 out. That puts us well within that 2 to 3% range that we typically bring our expenditures in under. So the hope would be at the end of the 2022-2023 year, we should be close to balanced as far as we might go backwards at $300,000 that we're intending to use. But other than that, we should be pretty close, hopefully, by the end of the year. If not, recall that we built our fund balance by $900,000 last year. So even if we do use it all, we'll basically just balance out to where we were at the start of 2021-22. The biennial budget by the state did not have any increases in the revenue limit or per pupil aid. So basically they said, we're not going to allow the budgets for school districts to increase over last year in this fiscal year, and that we were to use our ESSER funds to help backfill our budgets. And so those ESSER funds were originally designated to help mitigate some of the COVID instruction loss. And so we, as we claim out and use those dollars, have to try and identify areas that kind of meet that need within our budget already. So in our case, we're basically claiming out all of our ELL staff, meaning our teaching staff and aides that work with our English as a second language students. We're claiming out any of our buildings that aren't title aided, which would be in our case, north side, the middle school and high school. We're claiming out any intervention specialists that work with English or math kids in those buildings. And we're claiming those dollars on their salaries to make our budget work. What that means is going forward, hopefully in the next biennial state budget, they'll recognize that they not only have to give us the usual increases, but they have to give us what we missed these last 2 years. Otherwise, we got a big fiscal cliff coming up. But that'll be for next year's annual meeting. So come back then and we'll see how we're doing. What are still unknown at the time that this was put together, we were still unknown the final revenue limit, the final equalized aid, the final equalized valuations. Those, we got that information last Friday, and so we'll talk about that. Again, I talked about the budget book is out there. Contact me if you like. So the next slide is going to actually take us to Page 5, if you want it a little easier to read, you can just turn to page 5 in your booklet. And so this is just looking at a big picture snapshot of our budget. And so at the top, you'll see our balance sheet. And the fund balance, I should say, is at the top, and that's where, again, last year we started at 8 million. We finished the year at 8.9, almost 9 million. This year we're budgeted to then go back down to that $8 million. So ending up almost in line with where we started last year, and that wasn't on purpose. That's basically a coincidence. Looking at the operating revenue area in the kind of the middle upper part of your sheet, as we look forward to this year compared to last year, you can see local sources going down by nearly 1.2 million. Over $1 million of that is the reduction in our Fund 10 operating levy. Again, that's with the additional $1 million of state aid coming in. We have a reduction in our operating levy, and so that's where the majority of those dollars are. Some of the other areas that come into play get into gifts. We never know exactly what we're going to receive during the course of the year, so we're comparing now against last year's audited, and so gifts come in during the year, and so you recognize them. We can't necessarily plan for them, and so that's why our budget usually shows a little less in those areas. Don't see much area of change until you get down to the state sources, the 600, and again, you see a $975,000 reduction, or I should say addition. The majority of that addition is over $1 million of additional state equalization aid that comes in. We're going to see a slight reduction in some of our other state aids that we do receive, but that's what's driving that. Federal sources ends up balancing out pretty close to where it was last year. We've got $220,000 of the COVID relief dollars from the governor compared to the $310 last year. We're claiming $1.2 million of ESSER funds this year compared to about $700,000 last year. We're not planning on getting that Medicaid bonanza again this year, so that kind of offsets some of those. If it happens again, I'll be really excited. They never tell us until May, actually it's start of June, so it's kind of like an end of the year surprise whenever that does come in. And so what's that mean for our revenues for the year? We're actually 117,182 less than what we were for actual revenues last year. Again, we're ahead of what we were budgeted last year. Moving down to the expenditures, you can see almost across the board, we're looking at about a 5.7% increase compared to where we were with our last year's actual audited. That's again driven by, both our settlements that we had with staff based upon the CPI at the time, which is less than where we're at right now in the world of CPI. Some of those purchase services and utilities that we're also anticipating to see increases on. So those are really driving probably a bigger increase than we typically have seen in a number of years. And then the property tax levy, again, 11% reduction in the general fund levy. This is without a referendum passing, a 2.68% increase in the debt service fund and a 0.88% increase in the community service fund. So altogether a $939,815 decrease or a decrease of 7.57%. And we'll talk about the referendum later. Looking at the other funds quickly, Fund 21 and Fund 27, we don't use Fund 23 anymore. So Fund 21 is now long-term gifts that are going to be paid out or are going to be utilized over more than 1 year. But what the majority of Fund 21 now is they brought all the activity funds for all of our student programming into Fund 21. They used to be in their own fund, Fund 60. That's about $650,000 of our budget in the Fund 20s. And so we have a significant in and outflow of those student organization dollars. That means $7.1 million roughly is the cost of our Fund 27 special education. About $3 million of that, we get revenues from state and federal sources that fund special education. And then the other $4.1 million is basically a transfer over from Fund 10. So that would be the local cost of special education. I'm old enough and been doing this long enough now that, you know, there was a time when, not when I was in this business, but there was a time when special education was funded at 2/3 by the state. When I started 30 years ago, we were at about a 48% reimbursement rate in special education costs by the state. It's now eroded down to 23% before this last biennial budget. And so they did kick a little extra money in it, but they hoped that they were going to get to 30%, but what they didn't factor is, you know, the cost of special education keeps increasing, so it's actually going to be less than that. But there is a push out there, and hopefully we get some movement on it where they're recognizing that we probably should be funding special education better. And so that would certainly help us if they would start putting more money back into the special education aid. The number basically was frozen for 10 years. So imagine this is, again, special education. All school district costs are increasing on a year-by-year basis. Special education, which you have no control over, was growing faster than even regular education costs. And they just kept keeping the bucket the same, and so the percentages kept getting lower and lower and lower. And so I think they're hopefully gonna realize that we need to invest back into special education again. Oops, how far did I go? Way ahead somehow. Must have been excited as I was talking. Looking at the debt service funds, Fund 38s, Fund 39s. This is, again, without the referendum, you can see, you know, $2.1 million is the inflow and the outflow with the levy, and then what we're gonna pay off on our debt. The big key is, if you look at the bottom row in the blue numbers, 4.3 million was our ending balance at the end of last year. That basically meant that we had 2 years of payments left on our north side project, as well as there's just a little bit of money in there for our WRS liability that was still being paid off. That's going to be down to 2.2 million at the end of this year. So that means this year was our second to last payment, and then next year would be our last payment. And then we'll look at those numbers again should the referendum pass. Fund 40 is the project for Northside. You can see we started with 5.6 million, came in into the 2020-21 school year. We did just a little bit of work in that June of 2021. We did a lot more work last year, about $3 million worth of work. And then we're going to do the remainder of the work this summer. Much of that 2.3 million, 9 million was spent, and then we have some dollars that we'll spend out over the course of this fiscal year, and then it will be fully completed and spent out by the end of this year. Fund 50, you can see 2 years ago in 2021 at the end, we had about an $85,000 ending fund balance. Keep in mind that we had probably an inventory of commodities and other foods in our freezers that year of nearly 60 to 70,000. So that meant we didn't have much fund balance. We're one of the few school programs that has ran our funds 50, our food service in the black for a number of years. And so we're very fortunate that. Last year, they went to universal free, federally funded. Participation was up across the board, which was great. We were getting kids fed, and kids were utilizing the program. And the federal reimbursement rate was very beneficial to us. And you see, we grew back a fund balance like we've never seen before. We know this year that we have some inflationary costs that are going to drive food and some of our other labor costs as well. And so we may have to lean into that fund balance a little bit, which is probably okay, because otherwise the state will probably tell us your fund balance is too big, because they don't like you to, you're not supposed to be trying to make money off of our food service program. But, you know, I would love for universal free to come back, even if the Fed said we were going to reimburse it at a lower rate. We don't need to be making money like that. I think it's just a good thing for kids. And so I know there's been some of those discussions, and we'll have to see where that goes in the future. Fund 80. We are in the unique area where we have the public library is taxed as an underlying entity of the school district. Some entity always has to tax on behalf of the public library. Typically, it's oftentimes either the city or sometimes it's a county. In our case, we're doing it through the school district. We're a unique entity. It's probably better in the city in the sense that, than the city in the sense that, we do draw in from a bigger, wider area than just the city. So it makes some sense. I see why it was probably done. But it does skew our numbers compared to other school districts when you start looking at our levy and things because, again, other school districts aren't operating the public library. We do have a small portion in there, about $80,000, which is budgeted in there for the school liaison officer. So that we do utilize it for one other thing now. All right, we're now on to page 6. And again, we're actually getting close to the end of our slides, so don't think this is going to go on for hours. Looking at the levy, again, this is pre-referendum. And at the time we did this, you can see at the top, it was using a 15% growth in equalized valuation. With some of the housing prices, we saw some pretty big valuation growth. We also had one of our TIF districts for the west side of Monroe, which was started over 20 plus years ago. And the big project that was done as part of that was the new Pick and Save, but it was also the development of the street coming up there, the 8th Street West whole area. That went into a TIF area over 20 years ago. And basically what happens when you do that is they take the valuation of all those properties that were along 8th Street and say, we're going to freeze that valuation for all the other municipalities at what it was at that time. And then the city's going to collect those taxes to pay off that infrastructure that they put into making those things happen. And now 20 some years later, that suddenly gets released into us. And so I think that project grew over $16 million over that time. And so that those dollars suddenly come into our valuation. And so we have a few TIFs out there. Probably the best performing one was when they did years ago when they did the ethanol plant. I think that paid for itself in about 2-3 years, but then they used the additions to help offset some of the TIFs that were underperforming for a number of years before the dollars finally got released back to it gets released back to the school district, the county, and the Blackhawk Tech, which are the other taxing entities that come into play. So you can see there, the $11.4 million. We'll talk about what that means on a percentage basis, but there's also kind of the breakout as to how the varying municipalities, kind of 61% of our valuation is in the city. About 10% is 10.5% in the town of Monroe, 8.5% in the town of Clarno, 6% in the town of Sylvester, and then I think I missed Jordan in there somewhere. They're about 4.7% on down from there. Looking at what does that mean? Again, we talked about that being a 7.5% reduction. We were at $12.4 million levy last year. We're down to, 11.47 million for this year. The valuation growth, we were projecting at 15%. That mill rate then drops nearly 20%, almost 19.63% from 920 down to 739. And again, that's without the final 8 adjustments from last Friday, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So all those costs for housing valuations then drop with some of those levy rate drops. When you look at the historical perspective of the levy, I can go back to 92, 93 with my data. I can tell you that in the 80s and 70s, levy rates were typically higher. You can kind of see in 1996, 97, when kind of, quote, 2/3 funding came in, lasted a couple, 3 years there. It dropped some of those levy rates. But I did highlight the break back to 2007, 2008, because you can see that our total levy right now is less than it was 15 years ago. And so we sometimes hear, our taxes are always going up. That's not levy rate, that's the actual levy is less than what it was 15 years ago for the school district of Monroe. Now I'll transition to, should the referendum pass, certainly the levy and the expenditures increase. You can see now at the bottom line that the indebtedness at the end of the year, you add that 88 million on, and suddenly there's $90 million of outstanding debt at the end of the year. And then what does that mean for the levy? It's going to increase the levy substantially for the debt service levy. Nearly 19% total all increase in our levy. But with the valuation increases that we're looking at, and again, some of the offsets with the aid that we're getting, it brings that mill rate increase down to $9.53, so only 33 cents more than where we were with last year's levy rate. And again, that's before we talk about the numbers that came in last week. Here it is in the historical perspective again. Ends up being the 953 if you look at the mill rate column over there. Other than last year is lower than at any other point in time in those other 30 years that are listed. And you have years in there that are in the 1250 on up range, so in many that are in the 1150 range. So it's $2 to $3 lower than it was for many of those years. Not counting way back at the start when it was nearly an $18 mill rate.
Ron, did you want to make any comments about the previous slide with the actual mill rate? Because we did this before the mill rate came in. Did you want to?
That's where I'm moving right now.
All right, okay, shh.
So, before I get to the two slides and show you the breakout of our budget, I didn't produce a handout because literally these just came in Friday and I was working this morning on them, and I want to double verify them before we take them to the board next Monday. Looking at the numbers that came out last Friday, for taxes, we'll probably be looking at 68,000 more than what's in your book. All the numbers are going to be very close to what's in your book. That was because we had some open enrollment exemptions from last year that will increase it a little bit. We'll get an additional 11,000 in state aid from what was in your budget book. We'll get an additional 12,000 of revenue from state sources, meaning per pupil aid, than what was in your book. So all very close. So $90,000 is what the change in revenues will be. On the levy side of it, we also are seeing the final valuation increases came in at 17.99%, so higher than we were even projecting, and even though we had a high projection. And so what that would do is take the mill rate prior to the referendum down to $7.25, so almost $2 less, $1.95 less than where we currently are with the 21-22 school year. So, and if you look at the referendum dollars, even with the passage of the referendum, that would take the levy rate to $9.33 per thousand, 13 cents more than where it was last year. So those will be the numbers that I will verify and that will get presented to the board next Monday. So tonight when we act, we approve this budget, we approve this levy. I should say we approve this levy. And then next Monday night, the board will make those final adjustments. But yeah, we're looking at a 13% levy rate increase compared to
13 cent?
13 cents. What did I say?
Percent.
13%, no, 13 cents.
I did that
So-
once.
Yeah.
I think it's important to pause quick, because I've been to a lot of your presentations and we've been telling people the feels like, here's what, if we pass this is what, you've been conservative and said it could be 50 cents, right? So we're saying at a $200,000 house, that'd be $100 increase. And what I'm hearing you say is that is actually going to be $26. So we could pass a referendum, and when the final numbers come through, if you have a $200,000 house, the tax increase that you would see is a $26 increase.
We got the levy rate, yeah, and so I think the one area I caution people a little bit is, we're all likely to see a little bit of valuation increase on our houses, so that may bring that up a little bit. But yeah, the levy rate increase is actually only 13 cents more than last year, so that's
Fantastic.
a good number to have.
Fantastic.
Looking at, not just advance my slide, but advance your slides too. This is in your book. I gotta find the right page now. This is on page,
21.
let's see, is that the revenues? Yep, and then the expenses must be coming up again on page 25. So this is the breakout of where our revenues come from. So 63% of our revenues come from state sources. Much of that is the state equalized aid. We get other smaller aids such as there's, some transportation aid, there's some library aids, there's other little aids that come in, but the majority of that is the equalization aid that comes in. We are a highly aided district compared to most districts, which means our valuation per pupil is less than the state average. Our other big chunk of money comes from our local property taxes, which is at 27%. And so those two line items basically are 90% of our revenues come from either the state general aid or our local taxes. Federal sources is up. That's usually closer to 2% with our use of the ESSER funds and the additional allocation of the federal dollars by the governor. That's driving up the federal sources number a little bit. And then you can see really there isn't a lot. 3% is kind of open enrollment, and you're looking at 0 to 1% for all those other little areas of the budget. Moving to the expenditures, you'll see in green both the salaries and fringe as well as the interfund transfers. And why am I saying interfund transfers? Recall the interfund transfer really is going over to help offset the cost of special education. What is special education costs? Well, it's mainly people, right? And so I always add those two together to kind of come up with this is the portion of our budget that is really going to salary and fringes. And you can see add those two together, it's now 75%. I will say that when I started 30 years ago, that was probably closer to 60%. And then it grew to as high as nearly 80%. And I think you had some people who used to like to say, oh, that must mean you're paying your people too much. No, it was a reality of revenue limits where you just had to keep tightening your budget more and more and more because you're trying to maintain programs. And how do you maintain programs and offerings for students? You need to keep people in front of them teaching them, right? And so that was really why you saw that number grow. It's sliding back a little bit now, and that's partially driven by purchase service costs, right? I mean, the cost of services certainly in the last 3 years has grown at a much faster rate than any other costs that we have, whether that be utilities, whether it be projects for maintenance, whether it just be transportation, supporting of the technology infrastructure that we have. Those costs all grow. Everyone says, well, what about all that stuff you guys have? The reality is non-capital objects, meaning supplies and even the capital objects, which is equipment that goes into our, whether it be technology for students or whether it be the cost of the rubber for the roof that isn't the cost of installing it. 7% of our budget is actual stuff. And so it's a very small part of the district budget. And with that, I would entertain any questions people have. Otherwise, as I said, at any point in time, there's a lot of detail back there. If you are flipping through those and you see an individual line item that doesn't make sense to you, or you wonder why it looks the way it does, stop in and see me. I'd love to talk about the budget. It's my favorite part of the job, and unfortunately, it's a small part of my job, right, Joe?
Any questions for Ron? Thank you for always doing that. You do a fantastic job, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate all you do for the district. Moving on, so the next item is setting the 2022-2023 tax levy. And the resolution is, be it resolved that a school tax be assessed, which is advisory only, against all taxable property within the district in the amount of $11,474,840, which is necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget and debt service obligations. General Fund, Fund 10, $8,192,409. Non-referendum debt service fund, Fund 38, $238,003. Referendum debt service fund, Fund 39, $1,894,428. And community service fund, Fund 80, $1,150,000.
Yes, this is based upon the numbers that were presented to you and in the paper. And again, the board will make a modification and an update to the levy next Monday night at the Monday night board meeting.
Is that Terry? Or is that Nikki? Nikki, sorry. So I have a motion by Phil and a second by Terry.
Nikki.
Sorry, second by Nikki. I even wrote Nikki. A second by Nikki to set the 2022-2023 tax levy. All those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
And the next resolution that Teresa will announce is not one we commonly have. So only in years when we have a fall referendum. The referendum won't be known the results until after, obviously, our meeting tonight and even after the board's update next Monday. So we have an alternate resolution that should the referendum pass, then this becomes the levy that comes into play, so.
So as electors, we have, like Ron said, an alternative tax levy should the referendum pass in November. And again, these are reflective of the numbers in the book, not the newest numbers that Ron has. So the resolution is, be it resolved that a school tax be assessed, advisory only, against all taxable property within the district in the amount of $14,782,507, which is necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget, the debt service obligations. Our general fund, Fund 10, $8,192,409. Non-referendum debt service fund, Fund 38, $238,003. Referendum debt service fund, Fund 39, $5,202,095. And community service fund, Fund 80, $1,150,000.
Second.
So I have a motion by Stacy Kavanaugh and a second by Claire Leeds for the alternative tax levy. All those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Fantastic, thank you.
The resolutions are on page 54. For following along.
Oh, yes, thank you. So yeah, 54 in your book, you'll see all the resolutions that we have to do. And the next thing we have to do is to furnish textbooks. And so the resolution here is, be it resolved that the school district or the school board of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin shall be and is hereby authorized to furnish free textbooks for use in the school system and to establish a penalty for unusual and unreasonable wear according to the rules that may be established by the board. Wisconsin Statute 120-10, parent 15.
So moved.
Is that Stacy? So I have a motion by Cheryl and a second by Stacy to authorize the furnishing of textbooks. All those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next is and authorize the Board of Education to operate the hot lunch and milk programs. And the resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education, School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, is hereby directed to furnish hot lunches and milk to any and all students of said district at such places and times and at such cost as shall be set by said school board. And the school board is hereby authorized to pay any deficiency which may result from said lunch program. Wisconsin Statute 120-10, parent 16. I have a motion by Stacy and a second by Claire. Any comments or discussions? I guess I should pause for that. Hearing none, all those In favor by voice vote, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item is to authorize the Board of Education to provide for the sale of real and personal property not needed for school purposes in accordance with school board policy. The resolution states, be it resolved that electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, sell any property belonging to and not needed by said district for school purposes. Be it further resolved that the conduct of sale of such property be determined by said Board of Education, Wisconsin Statute 12010, parent 12.
Yeah, most of our equipment, when we do sell it, goes through Wisconsin surplus online auction, so we don't have it often, but if we do, we try and put word out, and it's on wisconsinsurplus.com for auction. Last year, another example of what falls under here is we had a refresh of our Chromebooks, and so we were able to, look at a secondhand company to take back our old Chromebooks, and with the shortage of Chromebooks that were out there, with teachers that were struggling to find ones, we got $15,000 back on, nearly 5-year-old Chromebooks. So those are the types of things that typically fall under this item.
So moved.
Second.
Was that Stacy? So I have a motion by Phil and a second by Stacy to authorize the board to provide for the sale of real and personal property not needed for school purposes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 12, authorize the Board of Education to lease school property. The resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to lease school sites, buildings, and equipment not needed for school purposes to any person for any lawful use at a reasonable rental fee. Wisconsin statutes 12013, parent 25, and 12044, parent 2.
So moved. Second.
So a motion by Terry and a second by Nikki to authorize the Board of Education to lease school property. Any questions or discussion?
Head Start would be one organization that uses it for their 4K, and then we also have Noah's Ark that uses as a part of Parkside for the operation of their before and after school program. Then obviously we have some temporary usages, but those are the 2 year-long usages we currently have.
And so by voice, all in favor by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. 13, authorize the Board of Education to purchase, operate, and maintain transportation vehicles or to finance contracts for the use and services of transportation vehicles. The resolution is, be it resolved that the school board of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to provide transportation services at district expense to pupils based upon the district's transportation policies and hazardous transportation plan, Wisconsin statute 121.54.
So moved.
Second.
Terry. All right, I have a motion by Eric and a second by Terry. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, 14 is to authorize the Board of Education to direct and provide for the prosecution or defense of any action or proceedings in which school district is interested. The resolution is, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, is directed to provide for the prosecution or defense of any action or proceeding in which the district is interested for the remainder of the 22-23 school year, Wisconsin statute 12010, parent 14.
Second.
Motion by Phil, second by Stacy. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. 15, authorize the annual salaries for the Board of Education members. And so current practice is that we are a volunteer board. And so if we continue, I guess that it would be resolved that the electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, continue as a volunteer board. Wisconsin Statute 12010, parent 3.
So moved. Second.
Is that Catherine? All right.
Sorry, speaking of.
No, good. Any questions or discussion?
I don't have the final number, but I know a couple years ago when somebody asked us to look it up, I think there was 7 boards in the state of Wisconsin that are voluntary boards that aren't being paid, so
Out of 423.
it is unusual, so appreciate all that you guys do.
So all those in favor of continuing as a volunteer board by voice vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Authorize the expense reimbursement for the Board of Education members. So the resolution is, be it resolved by the electors of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, that the board members be reimbursed for their actual and necessary expenses up to the limits defined by board policy when traveling outside the district to perform school board duties in accordance with state statutes. Wisconsin Statute 12010, parent 4. This is our current practice.
So moved.
Second.
Is that Catherine? Motion by Joe, second by Catherine. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, by voice vote, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Establish date and time for the 2023 annual meeting. So I believe in the past, have we said it here? Or have
Prior
we
to
deferred
last
it to the
year,
board?
prior to last year, we used to set it, and I think what it came down to was, you know, sometimes this date made sense. I think last year we tried to run it on a regular board meeting night, and then it becomes a really long night, and especially if you have a long board meeting. And so I think they kind of gave the authority to the board to make that decision, and I think we set the date this year in like July or August and set it for tonight. So it's not like we wait till the last minute, but it does give you some flexibility to look at what is happening versus us trying to look forward a year from now and see what date might make the most sense.
And there is a window that an annual meeting has to fall in.
Yeah, I mean, the old statutory one that some districts still follow is the 4th Monday in July. We don't have any clue what's going on with the state, with the budget in the 4th Monday in July, so I mean, I could tell you anything. And so there's a reason why we backed it up into October, it's so that we actually have a little fairer picture. Again, much like tonight, I couldn't give you the final numbers that are gonna be acted on Monday, but I basically told you what they're going to be, right? So you have an idea, and so that's why we as a district have done it in October since before I came. So it's been, 15 plus years, I think, since they've been doing it here in Monroe, probably almost 20 years. But this, by having it just not be defined, it lets you make that determination as to which date makes more sense as you get closer.
So Ron, would you prefer that we leave it open and then pick a date as we get?
Yeah, I think that makes sense for the board, and I think, personally, will it likely often fall on the 3rd Monday in October? I think it will. I think we tried it one other date one time and it didn't work well for us, but it doesn't hurt to give us a little bit of flexibility.
So-
Can we say October to fill the resolution requirement?
Well, I think we can fill the resolution just by authorizing, there would be the Board of Education be authorized to set the date.
Correct.
We could
Pick the date
say,
at a
we could
later
say it's in
meeting.
October, but we could just we could just authorize the board to do that. So then the resolution would be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of Monroe, Greene County, Wisconsin, be authorized to set the date for the 2023 annual meeting and budget hearing.
So moved. Second.
So a motion by Catherine, a second by Stacy. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. And we are on our final item, and so I need one more motion at 7:56.
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion by Eric and a second by Catherine to adjourn. All those in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.